We assume that silence is an act of suppression. When we look back at the grand scope of history, at the burned libraries, the buried scrolls, and the whispered rites of the mystery schools, we see a crime scene. We see a deliberate hoarding of truth by the few to control the many. We see a locked door, and we assume that on the other side of that door lies a specific set of facts that would set us free if only we were allowed to read them. But there is a different kind of silence. There is a silence that does not come from a hand over a mouth, but from the sheer inability of the listener to hear the frequency being spoken. The most dangerous idea in the study of ancient wisdom is not that the knowledge was stolen from you. The most dangerous idea is that the knowledge was never hidden at all. It was placed in plain sight, left completely unguarded, because the authors knew something about the human mind that we have forgotten. They knew that the most effective way to hide a secret is not to bury it underground, but to write it in a language that only the initiated can perceive. The door was never locked. It was just too heavy for an unprepared mind to push open. To understand why this distinction matters, we must first look at the story we have told ourselves for centuries. It is a compelling story. It is the story of the thief and the victim. In the commonly accepted frame of history, we view the ancient world as a hierarchy of information control. We look at the Egyptian priesthoods, the Greek mystery schools, the Gnostics, and later, the alchemists, and we see an exclusionary club. We see institutions designed to create a gap between the initiated and the profane. This narrative feels reasonable because it mirrors the structures of power we see in the modern world. Today, information is currency. Governments classify documents. Corporations patent formulas. Institutions gatekeep credentials. We understand the concept of security clearance. So, when we look back at Hermeticism, the spiritual philosophy attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, and we see that it was shrouded in allegory, myth, and complex symbolism, we project our modern motivations onto ancient minds. We tell ourselves that they hid this knowledge because it gave them political power. If the masses knew that they were divine beings, that as above, so below implies a direct connection between the individual and the cosmos without the need for an intermediary, then the temples would empty. The kings would lose their divine right. The social order would collapse. Therefore, the logic goes, the knowledge was hidden to maintain the status quo. It was a mechanism of control. This explanation feels complete because it satisfies our cynicism. It confirms that the world has always been unfair, that the elites have always been conspiring against the common man, and that ignorance is something inflicted upon us from the outside. It positions the seeker as a victim of theft. You do not know the secrets of the universe because someone took them away from you. It is also a comfortable explanation. It suggests that if you could just find the right book, the right translated scroll, or the right leaked document, you would instantly possess the wisdom of the ages. It treats wisdom like data, a file that can be transferred from one drive to another. We rarely question this frame. We see the burning of the Library of Alexandria not just as a tragedy, but as a deliberate erasure. We see the persecution of heretics as a fear of the truth they held. We assume that the masses were ready for the truth, hungry for it, and capable of holding it, but were denied it by a jealous few. But this perspective rests on a fundamental assumption that knowledge and information are the same thing. It assumes that you can give a person the truth in the same way you can give them a loaf of bread. However, if you look closer at the texts that survived the Corpus Hermeticum, the Emerald Tablet, the Taoist alcoves, the Vedic metaphors, you begin to see that the authors were not afraid of the people reading the words. They were afraid of what would happen if the people read the words without changing their state of consciousness first. Here's the part that complicates the picture. If the goal was truly to keep this knowledge secret, the ancients were terrible at it. Hermetic and esoteric symbolism is not hidden in dark caves. It is carved into the facades of the greatest cathedrals in Europe. It is woven into the foundational myths of civilizations. It is painted into the masterpieces of the Renaissance, commissioned by the very church that was supposedly suppressing it. The principles of the Kybalion, the stages of alchemical transmutation, and the geometry of the sacred are displayed in public squares, on currency, and in folk tales told to children. If the intention was to erase the knowledge, why encode it in stone that lasts for millennia? Why weave it into the structure of the tarot, a card game played in taverns? Why write parables that travel across borders faster than armies? Real secrets are destroyed. They are burned, erased, and unwritten. But Hermetic knowledge was not destroyed. It was preserved. It was encased in a shell. This creates a tension in our standard narrative. If the elites wanted to hide the truth, they would not have embedded it in the culture. This suggests that the hiding was not an attempt to remove the information from the world, but to alter how it was accessed. Consider the alchemists of the Middle Ages. They wrote about turning lead into gold. For centuries, the masses, and indeed, many greedy kings believed this was a literal instruction for creating material wealth. They chased the formula, built laboratories, and spent fortunes trying to achieve a physical reaction. But to the initiate, the lead was the heavy, unrefined state of the human ego, and the gold was the enlightened, crystallized spirit. The instructions were never about metallurgy. They were about internal psychology and spiritual evolution. The secret was never hidden. It was published. It was read by thousands. But it was only understood by those who had the capacity to see past the literal meaning. This is the tension. The knowledge was hidden in plain sight. It was protected not by guards, but by meaning. The barrier to entry was not a wall, but a mirror. If you looked at the text with a greedy mind, you saw a recipe for gold. If you looked at it with a fearful mind, you saw heresy. Only if you looked at it with a cultivated, quiet mind did you see the map of the soul. This implies that the masses were not denied the knowledge by an external force. They were denied the knowledge by their own internal filters. The ancients didn't hide the truth from the people. They hid the truth from the lower aspects of the people. They structured the wisdom so that it would automatically repel anyone who wasn't ready to use it responsibly. It is a self-protecting mechanism. The text reads you as much as you read the text. Once you recognize this mechanism, the idea of a self-protecting truth, you begin to see the same pattern repeating across every major wisdom tradition in human history. It is not unique to Hermeticism. It is a structural necessity of high knowledge. Look at the structure of the parable in the Judeo-Christian tradition. A teacher speaks to a crowd of thousands. He tells a story about seeds, or a prodigal son, or a vineyard. To the masses, it is a nice story with a simple moral. They go home entertained. But to the inner circle, the same story contains a metaphysical instruction on the nature of the kingdom of heaven. Why speak in parables? The texts themselves answer this. Seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. The parable is a filter. It allows the truth to enter the mind of the listener without shattering their worldview, waiting there until they are mature enough to unpack it. Move east, and you encounter the Zen koan. A master gives a student a riddle that has no logical answer. What is the sound of one hand clapping? The student struggles, fights, and breaks their logical mind against the wall of the riddle. The secret of the koan cannot be told. If the master explained the meaning would die. The student must become the person who understands. The knowledge is hidden from the student's intellect to force the student's intuition to awaken. Go back further to the Sphinx of Egypt and Greece. The Sphinx stands as the guardian of the mysteries, posing a riddle to travelers. If you answer incorrectly, you are devoured. This is not just a mythic monster. It is a symbol of the threshold. The traveler is the consciousness seeking higher knowledge. If you approach the mysteries with the wrong answer, meaning the wrong perception of what a human being is, you are consumed by your own animal nature. In the Vedic traditions, there is the concept of adhikara, spiritual competency or qualification. It was understood that teaching non-dualism to a person who is still deeply attached to their ego and their desires is not just useless, it is dangerous. It leads to nihilism or a spiritual ego where the person believes they are God, but acts like a tyrant. In every era, the pattern remains the same. The truth is universal and ever-present. The reception of truth depends on the vessel, the mind, and body of the student. The method of transmission is encoded to bypass the unworthy vessel and resonate only with the prepared vessel. This is why the alchemists used symbols of dragons, green lions, and weddings. This is why the Gnostics spoke of archons and aeons. This is why the indigenous elders speak in myths of coyote and raven. They are not just being poetic. They are encrypting the signal. They are ensuring that the knowledge survives the shifting politics of the time because symbols can adapt to any culture while remaining inaccessible to the literal mind that seeks to exploit it. The masses are not a group of people. In this context, the masses is a state of mind. It is the collective consciousness that operates on survival, reaction, fear, and literalism. The Hermeticists weren't hiding knowledge from peasants. They were hiding it from the mob psychology that lives inside every human being, including the wealthy and the powerful. Interpretations may vary on the specifics of these traditions, but the structure of the open secret is undeniable. It is a filter that selects for depth. If we accept this pattern, the implication is unsettling. It forces us to confront a reality about ourselves and our current information age. We live in an era where we believe that access to information equates to knowledge. We believe that if we can Google it, we know it. We demand transparency. We demand that all archives be opened, all secrets revealed. We feel entitled to the truth. But the Hermetic structure implies that access is irrelevant if the capacity to perceive is missing. Imagine you are standing in a room filled with radio waves. The music is playing right now, all around you. It is vibrating through your body. But if you do not have a receiver, and if that receiver is not tuned to the specific frequency of the broadcast, you hear only silence. You could scream that the music is being hidden from you. You could blame the station. You could blame the government. But the problem is not the transmission. The problem is the instrument. The implication is that Hermetic secrecy was never about elitism in the way we understand it. It was about safety. What happens when you give high voltage power to a circuit that is not wired to handle it? It doesn't power the device. It fries the wires. What happens when you give the knowledge that reality is a mental construction to a mind that is unstable, narcissistic, or filled with hate? They do not become a master of their reality. They become a solipsist. They detach from moral responsibility. They use the truth to justify their worst impulses. We see this today in the distortion of spiritual concepts into tools for manipulation and greed. The ancients understood that knowledge carries a psychic weight. To know the structure of reality is to bear the burden of that structure. If you strip away the illusions of society, religion, and identity from a person who needs those illusions to function, you do not liberate them. You drive them insane. This is usually the point where most explanations stop. They stop at the idea that you need to be smart or educated to understand. But it's not about intellect. It's about resonance. The implication is that the barrier to truth is you. It is your attachments, your dogmas, your fear, and your desire for the truth to be something that serves you, rather than something you serve. The hidden knowledge is hidden by the noise of your own mind. The elites didn't hide it. We hide it from ourselves, every moment of every day, by choosing distraction over depth and literalism over meaning. We are the keepers of the gate, and we keep it locked from the inside. We need to shift our definition of what Hermetic means. The word comes from Hermes, the messenger, but it also gives us the word hermetically sealed. We usually think this means sealed tight, to keep things out. But in the alchemical tradition, the Hermetic seal was used to keep the essence in. It was a way to create a contained environment where transformation could happen without contamination from the outside world. Why was the knowledge hidden from the masses? Because the masses are the contamination, not the people the noise. The collective consensus reality, the social pressure to conform, the chaotic, shifting emotional tides of the public sphere. To do the great work to transform the lead of the self into gold one requires a hermetic seal. You must be in the world, but not of it. You must protect the delicate process of your own awakening from the crude judgments and misunderstandings of the collective. If you take a delicate chemical reaction and expose it to the open air too soon, it fails. If you take a developing spiritual insight and expose it to the ridicule or scrutiny of the uninitiated crowd, it evaporates. The secrecy was a protective shell for the practitioner. It allowed the philosopher to live safely within a society that might otherwise kill them for their ideas, yes, but more importantly, it allowed the ideas to live safely within the philosopher. If everyone is shouting, you cannot hear the whisper. The ancients hid the knowledge to create a space of silence where the whisper could be heard. They wrapped the truth in symbols because symbols are silent. A symbol does not argue with you. It does not demand you believe it. It sits there, patiently, waiting for you to resonate with it. It allows the masses to walk past it without destroying it, while allowing the seeker to find it without being destroyed by it. So, the masses were not the enemy. They were simply the ocean. The hermetic knowledge was the pearl. You do not throw pearls into the churning surf. They will be lost. You keep them in the shell until the shell is opened by a hand that knows what it is holding. This reframes the entire history of esoteric suppression. It wasn't a war between the truth-tellers and the liars. It was a quarantine. It was a way of ensuring that powerful tools were not left lying around in a nursery. And perhaps it was an act of mercy. To leave the masses in their illusions is sometimes kinder than forcing them to face a light that would blind them. As the adage goes, do not wake the sleepwalker too abruptly, or they may fall. The hiding was not an act of malice. It was an act of waiting for the human consciousness to mature to the point where the seal could be broken safely. And this brings us to the present moment. We live in a time where the seals are breaking. The texts are online. The symbols are deconstructed in videos like this one. The secret is out. The Library of Alexandria has been digitally resurrected and placed in your pocket. But ask yourself, has the world become more enlightened, or have we just become more confused? We have access to all the Hermetic wisdom, all the Gnostic Gospels, all the non-dual teachings. Yet, the chaos of the masses seems louder than ever. Perhaps the ancients were right. Perhaps throwing the doors open didn't liberate the truth, it just drowned it in noise. Or, perhaps, the test has changed. Maybe the test of the ancient world was finding the knowledge. You had to travel, search, and prove your worth to enter the temple. Maybe the test of the modern world is filtering the knowledge. The temple is everywhere, but it is covered in graffiti. The signal is broadcasting constantly, but the static is deafening. The Hermetic seal is no longer a physical secrecy. It is now a mental discipline. You have to create the silence inside yourself, because the world will no longer give it to you. The knowledge is no longer hidden from you, but it is still hidden for you. It is waiting for you to build the vessel that can hold it without cracking. The door was never locked, but you still have to walk through it alone. If this way of seeing the world stayed with you, the next video continues the thread.